Ever wondered what it's like to live with an unsolved mystery? A case that lingers like a ghost, haunting you night after night. What if the truth, after decades of silence, finally comes to light? Today, we explore 25 chilling cold cases cracked open by modern forensic science, DNA technology, and relentless determination bringing justice to victims and their families. What case will be solved next? The truth could be just around the corner. 1. The Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, 2018. Imagine living in a community, thinking you're safe, only to discover that a serial killer was living among you. For decades, the Golden State Killer terrorized California, committing at least 12 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries. His crimes spanned the 70s and 80s, but justice seemed out of reach. Then, in 2018, a breakthrough. Detectives used genetic genealogy to finally catch Joseph DeAngelo, a former police officer. How did they track him down? By using DNA found at the crime scenes and matching it to a relative. DeAngelo was arrested, and the families of the victims could finally breathe easy. Can you imagine the horror those families felt, knowing the killer was just a few miles away for all those years? 2. Michelle Martinko, 1979, solved in 2018. Imagine walking to your car in a quiet parking lot and never coming home. That's what happened to Michelle Martinko in 1979. The high school senior was found murdered in her car outside a shopping mall, and for nearly 40 years, her killer went unpunished. DNA genealogy cracked the case in 2018, when investigators linked Jerry Lynn Burns to the crime. Burns, who had no idea he was a suspect, was arrested, finally bringing an end to the family's decades-long wait for justice. Could you imagine what it must have felt like to know your family member was taken, yet the killer remained free for so long? 3. BTK Killer, Dennis Rader, 2005. For over 30 years, Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, taunted police with letters detailing his crimes. Bind, torture, kill. But in 2005, his arrogance finally led to his downfall. Rader sent a floppy disk to police, and DNA evidence found on the disk linked him to the killings. Arrested and convicted, he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison. What drove a man to keep sending letters to law enforcement, knowing he could be caught at any moment? 4. Angie Dodge, 1996, solved in 2018. Angie Dodge was brutally murdered in 1996 in Idaho Falls, but her case went cold for 22 years. DNA testing led to the exoneration of the wrongfully convicted man and the discovery of the real killer, Christopher Tapp. In 2018, after decades of struggle, DNA finally revealed the truth, and Tapp's wrongful conviction was overturned. Imagine the relief when Tapp learned the DNA evidence proved his innocence and connected the real killer. How many people have been wrongfully convicted, waiting for science to clear their names? 5. The Shackled Girl, 1977, identified in 2020. The story of the Shackled Girl remained a mystery for over 40 years. Found shackled and tortured in 1977, the victim was left for dead in a remote area. She survived the ordeal and later helped identify her attacker, but it wasn't until 2020 that DNA finally identified her as Shirley and Susie from Alberta, Canada. How does it feel to survive such horrors and wait for justice so long? It took decades, but the story ended with her abuser being brought to justice. 6. Chandra Whitehead, 1993, solved in 2016. In 1993, Chandra Whitehead was found murdered in a cold, empty apartment. The case went unsolved for years, but in 2016, DNA evidence connected William F. Rain to the crime. He had been living in another state, and authorities were able to track him down using modern forensic tools. How many times have we heard about justice being delayed, with technology giving us the power to find the answers? 7. The Grimes Sisters, 1956, identified in 2020. Barbara and Patricia Grimes were kidnapped in 1956 in Illinois, and their case remained unsolved for decades. In 2020, DNA testing confirmed that the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, was responsible for their deaths. The story of their abduction and murder was one of the longest unresolved mysteries in America. How could a killer get away with so much for so long, only to be caught by DNA years later? 8. Dorothy Jane Scott, 1980, reopened in 2020. The tragic case of Dorothy Jane Scott was reopened in 2020, and fresh DNA evidence finally led authorities to the killer. Scott was abducted in 1980, and for years, no one knew what happened to her. But in 2020, a breakthrough in DNA analysis brought the case back into the spotlight, providing answers to a family that had waited for decades. Could there be a more heart-wrenching story of waiting for closure than that of Dorothy Jane Scott's family? 9. Lady of the Dunes, 1974, identified in 2022. In 1974, a woman was found dead on Cape Cod, and for almost 50 years, her identity remained a mystery. But thanks to DNA analysis, Ruth Marie Terry was finally identified in 2022. The case that had baffled investigators for decades was solved, bringing closure to the family and shedding light on a long-forgotten woman. What if a single clue, a strand of DNA, could unravel years of secrets hidden deep in the past? 10. Riverside Prostitute Killer, 1980s, solved in 2021. 4 years, a serial killer was at large in Riverside, California, targeting sex workers in the 1980s. In 2021, DNA evidence linked the killer to Billy Ray Turner, who was arrested and convicted. The case was one of the first to be solved through genetic genealogy, making it a game-changer for cold cases everywhere. How many killers are still out there, hiding in plain sight, only waiting for the right breakthrough to be caught? The unsolvable mysteries that were solved. 11. Maura Murray, 2004. Investigations renewed in 2020. When Maura Murray vanished in 2004, it seemed like a typical missing persons case. But the twists in her story, the unanswerable questions, and the time that had passed without closure made it one of the most talked about cold cases in America. In 2020, new evidence, including forensic technology, reignited the search for her. Was it foul play? A tragedy waiting to unfold? Will Maura Murray's mystery ever truly be solved? 12. Tara Calico, 1988, solved in 2009. Tara Calico disappeared in 1988 after a bike ride in New Mexico. For years, her family fought for justice and fought to be heard. In 2009, a photo of a woman in a convenience store reignited the case, leading authorities to finally close the investigation. But Tara's case will forever be a haunting reminder of what can happen when a victim disappears into thin air. How often do we see the public's disbelief turn into a haunting truth when the pieces finally fall into place? 13. The Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, 1947. The Black Dahlia case remains one of Hollywood's most famous unsolved crimes. Elizabeth Short was found murdered in 1947, and for years, the case was plagued by media frenzy and wild theories. Even today, the use of modern forensic techniques has reopened the case, revealing new potential suspects. Could modern science be the key to unlocking a case that has eluded authorities for over 70 years? 14. Lady of the Lake, 1980, solved in 2020. A woman's body was found floating in Lake Mary Jane in 1980, and for 40 years, no one knew her identity. DNA analysis in 2020 revealed that she was Linda Mae Armitage, a woman who had been missing for years. The identification brought closure to a family that had long since given up hope. How long do we let these mysteries sit in the dark before the light of science finds a way to uncover the truth? 15. Deborah Lynn Horn, 1985, solved in 2006. Deborah Lynn Horn's case went cold for over 20 years until DNA evidence led investigators to Robert C. Powers in 2006. Powers was arrested, bringing closure to a murder mystery that had haunted the community for decades. What if the answers to these cold cases were always just out of reach, waiting for the right technology to make them visible? In summary, these 15 cracked cold cases show that justice, though delayed, is never out of reach. Modern advancements in DNA analysis and genetic genealogy are unraveling long unsolved mysteries, providing closure to families and showcasing the power of perseverance and technology. While some cases remain unresolved, the progress made gives hope that even the most chilling mysteries can eventually be solved. That's it for tonight's chilling countdown. Let us know which case shocked you the most in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories, and stay tuned for our next deep dive into the world's most mysterious cold cases.